Okay, recording.
I hope it's not as hot in Estonia.
It is not, actually. It is 60 degrees. So it's actually a little bit chilly, believe it or not. Okay, maybe what we can do is maybe we can just kick off intros, and then hopefully by then Kevin will have joined as well.
Good plan. Good plan.
Okay, perfect.
Why don't you start, Karthik?
Sounds great. Hey, y'all, I'm Karthik Balasubramanian. I'm the chair of the Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Council. So we'll officially kick off the July 2026 meeting. The MAAC is a mayorally appointed body that is the voice of folks with disabilities in the district. I personally have Stargardt's macular degeneration, which makes it impossible for me to drive and puts me in the majority of folks with disabilities who do not drive or do not own a car. I live in Ward 6, work in Ward 1, and just kind of very excited to make DC a more safe, accessible, reliable, and friendly environment for folks with disabilities to just get around from point A to point B. So with that, we generally just do a quick round of introductions. I'll pass it over to Kelly, and then she can pass it over to more folks.
Okay, great. So Kelly Mack, I live in Ward 3. I'm also disabled and use a motorized wheelchair for mobility. And so always interested in maximizing transportation accessibility for folks who live in or visit DC. And I'll pass it over to our member, Matthew.
I'm typing in the chat.
Matthew can't be on audio, but he says hello. Perfect. Great. So then maybe we can just go around the room from here. So maybe Faye, you can introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Great to attend today's MAAC meeting. I'm Faye Dascabe. I am a senior policy advisor at the Department of For-Hire Vehicles. Our agency regulates transportation network companies and taxis. And we've been doing a lot of work on the wheelchair accessibility, specifically in the for-hire sector. And we're here, Director Rogers is here to present some of our recent work. And I'll pass it on to Director Rogers.
Thanks, Faye. Jonathan Rogers, I'm the director at DFHV and always happy to join a MAAC meeting. So thanks for having us.
Kevin, would you introduce yourself next? I think you're still muted, Kevin. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I'm Kevin Whitfield. I'm the committee director for the DC Council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment.
And Zach.
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Zach Smith, liaison to the MAAC District Department of Transportation.
I'm just going to start calling because we have a number of folks. Grace Cooney.
Hello, I'm one of the interpreters tonight.
Thank you. Apologies. Lindsay DeBoo.
Hi, everyone. Lindsay DeBow, work for Department of For-Hire Vehicles along with Faye. So echoing all the similar projects that we work on, with wheelchair accessibility being one of the biggest ones, but I also assist with our Accessibility Advisory Council, which is more focused on rideshare and taxi related accessibility issues. So excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Great. Angelo Castro.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angelo. This is my first MAAC meeting. I also am outside near Georgetown University where I live. So if you hear any airplanes overhead, that's what the sound is. But yeah, I moved to DC in November to Georgetown Ward 2. I have been very active in attending ANC meetings and PAC meetings. And so kind of related, I have found this, and I'm a huge accessibility and pedestrian advocate. I like seeing cities be very walkable and livable. Previously, I lived in San Francisco, so I'm excited to see all the work that y'all are doing and participate and help out in any way that I can. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Anais and Siba?
I dropped my intro into the chat. I am here at Kelly's invitation to learn more about AVs in advance of the hearing on Monday. So thank you all very much. And I'm going to go back on mute.
All right, great. Peter Steffen.
Hi, everyone. Peter Steffen. I am the director of the Disability Rights, and our agency ensures compliance with the ADA and related disability rights laws for the entire district government.
Thank you. CT Tyson. Can't hear you, CT. I'll pass and we'll come back. Okay. Sarah Tanaka.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I'm the legal intern with the Office of Disability Rights here this summer, working for Peter Steffen. So thanks for letting me hop on this call.
Of course. Thank you. Laura Kim. Laura, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I'm not super familiar with Google Meet, but
oh, it's okay.
all good. Hi, my name is Laura Kim. I work at the Independence Center of Northern Virginia, located in Arlington. And we have some staff members who are DC residents, and I'm here today as a member of the public just to listen to the issue and see how I can be of support.
Thanks so much. Heather Foote.
Heather Foote with the Pedestrian Advisory Council, and I also work on older adult transportation issues, primarily east of the river and with Spanish-speaking residents. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. CT, are you okay? I still can't hear. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. No worries. I think there might be two other folks. Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I'm so sorry. Thank you for your grace. Hello, everybody. CT. It is lovely to be with old friends and wonderful to meet new friends. Hello, Faye. Hello, others. My day job is a disability advocate with the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, where I've had the opportunity to learn more than I'd ever want to know about autonomous vehicles and policy. In my previous role in other disability advocacy, I did a lot of work with the DFHV's Accessibility Advisory Committee, chairing that for a while, but also just getting to know a lot of the ins and outs of DC government and the council and DC just accessible service overall. And I'm also in a local group called the DMV Disability and Senior Community Group that has met every week since the COVID lockdown. We talk about we have an advocacy section, and transportation comes up every weekend. So I know how important it is to local folks, and I'm just grateful for the MAAC and for everybody that's continued the work in the district. So thank you.
Thanks so much. I think our last person is for introductions is Allison White.
Hi there, this is Allison White with the DC Developmental Disabilities Council. Good to see a lot of folks here. Thanks for I haven't joined this meeting before, and I have always wanted to stay up to date on everything. So thanks for having me. I'm eager to be here and learn and listen.
Well, welcome everybody. Karthik, if it's all right with you, I thought we might table the bus update for now, if we have time at the end. Okay, so I think maybe the best way to start is just a bit of an introduction, maybe from Kevin about the bill, what's in it, and then we could hear from Director Rogers, and then maybe do a bit of Q&A from the MAAC and then from the public. Sound good? Okay, great. So Kevin, would you be able to give us a little overview of the recent occurrences, and we'll start from there.
Sure. I'm trying to think of when AVs first started really picking up steam, but I would say about almost 2 years ago, the committee held its first roundtable on autonomous vehicles. This was following up on some emergencies that DDOT had asked us to move to address some of the driverless testing regime. I should take a step back and say the current posture of the district is district law allows AV companies to engage in testing with a test operator present. There was originally a requirement that DC issue a permit for driverless testing, but in lieu of that rulemaking stalling, operators are still doing operator present testing. So that was sort of the current posture. I think in the last year or so, we've seen a lot more, I would say, excitement about autonomous vehicles. And so we had been getting increasing asks from members of the community to sort of clear the way for autonomous vehicles to begin operating in DC. And then, of course, I won't hide the ball. We've also been reached out by, or we've been contacted by the operators themselves. So your Waymos, your Zooks, and other, and Uber, Tesla, who are interested in being able to operate in the district. I think the excitement around operating the district is both twofold. We're a relatively large market, although we're a mid-sized city, but also I think they understand the incredible sort of marketing power of being present in the nation's capital. And so that's part of the reason why we see so much excitement. I won't characterize Department of For-Hire Vehicles position because the director is here and can talk about it. DDOT's position has been one of caution. I think they are trying to ground AV deployment in safety. I think we have, over the last year, begin to think that DDOT's position has been maybe a little too cautious. But there are significant challenges associated with operating in the district. We have federal roads alongside our locally managed ones. So that's a legitimate challenge. We have lots of First Amendment activity in DC. That's a significant challenge. So I think they've been wanting to try to get those things right. And I think, if you ask my boss, Councilman Rowland, his sort of philosophy has always been, I don't want to be first, I don't want to be last. We have seen incidences in other jurisdictions where AVs have been allowed to operate, which I think has reinforced that being cautiously optimistic about this technology is the right approach. So a couple of months ago, there was a power outage in San Francisco that resulted in AVs simply being stalled in the middle of roadways. A couple of weeks ago, during some of the significant flooding in Texas, AVs were being routed into floodwaters. There's an event, I can't remember where this one was, where an AV blew past a stopped bus with the school bus stop arm extended, which is like the single most dangerous thing you can do in a vehicle. I think that offense carries the most points of single thing you can do from an insurance perspective. And so incidents like that tell us that this technology is pretty baked, but it's not fully baked. There's a lot of still ongoing challenges there. So I think to speak to some of those challenges, but also get the district place where we're prepared to see autonomous vehicles and see them safely deployed, we worked on introducing our bill. It was introduced back in May. The co-introducers for that were council members Pinto and Fruman. And our bill, sort of at the outset, paves the way for commercial AV operations in the district. So we start that by creating a commercial AV permit. DDOT would be responsible for issuing those permits. They would only be issued to applicants that have a demonstrated record of safe testing in DC. So they need to have had a safe record of driver present testing. Right now, the bill also creates a strict timeline for DDOT to basically push out its new driverless testing permit. And only after completing both driver present testing and driverless testing would you be qualified for a commercial AV permit. But it's not just a safe record of testing. You would also need to submit a first responder plan that educates first responders, law enforcement, and emergency personnel on how to interact with those AVs. So what if one is in a collision? How do you safely move it? What are the risks? How do you open the door if it's stalled out? Sort of those basic questions of how to operate with AVs. And you also have to submit a continuity of operations plan to speak to issues like, what if there's a power outage or network issues that could complicate the ability for these to be operated safely? We create a phased timeline for the deployment of AVs. So like I mentioned before, we would say within a certain period of time of the law's passage, DDOT would need to release its driverless testing permit. 120 days after the release of that driverless testing permit, DDOT would then release its commercial AV permit. For a limited period of time when that initial commercial permit is issued, fleet cap, commercial AV fleets would actually be capped at 200 vehicles. If an AV wants to expand, or if an AV company wants to expand its fleet, it would need to submit a comprehensive plan that speaks to some of the issues that a larger fleet would create. So that's when DDOT would be looking at how you're managing traffic congestion. What is your curbside access policy? What are the ways in which you minimize deadheading or passengerless trips that could just sort of clog up streets without actually offering anyone rides? How you would ensure that each ward and riders in each ward get equitable access to AVs. So we've heard complaints about, people in wards 5, 7, and 8 who have to wait a long period of time to get or simply get rides refused to them when they're trying to book via a ride sharing or ride hailing app. And then how do you, what is your user interface and how is it accessible to people with disabilities is another part of that comprehensive plan. I will say that timeline is probably subject to change based off of commentary on the bill. It's also, we'll be passing this in late 2026 if this, passes this council period. And so I think a lot of those dates need to be adjusted. The bill also establishes clear rules for when an autonomous driving system can be engaged. And this is not just in the commercial AV context, but in the personal automobile context too. So as folks may know, AVs are roughly divided into 5 levels of automation. Levels 1 and 2 are kind of like your lane assist technologies that are present in lots of modern vehicles and aren't really what we would think of as like a fully automated vehicle. So these are the technologies that if you're drifting into another lane, they correct you. If you're rapidly approaching a vehicle in front of you, it will prompt you to brake or perhaps even gently brake for you. I sort of characterize level 1 and 2 as sort of like basic safety features of like a modern smart car. Level 3 is, I think, the most dynamic one. So it's a semi-autonomous mode, but it's a level at which the human driver may be prompted more often than not to take over driving tasks. And level 4 and 5 are really what we consider like the fully autonomous modes. So the bill broadly allows for the use of level 1 and level 2 technologies. Again, those are like the basic driver assistance technologies. It restricts the use of level 3, 4, and 5, except when you're operating pursuant to a testing permit. And then for actual commercial AV operations, so think about like robo-taxis, the bill reserves level 4 and level 5 engagement to that context of commercial AVs. In terms of sort of like adequately or how we sort of recover our costs from this bill, the bill establishes a vehicle miles traveled tax. So this would assess commercial operators for 15 cents for every mile traveled. That is a very high vehicle miles travel tax. So if you look at other states that have one, I think Hawaii has one, Virginia has one. It is almost 10 times what you see in other states. There are a couple of reasons for that in our bill. One, in other states that have adopted a VMT, their VMT is actually a replacement for the gas tax. So what the typical VMT or vehicle miles travel tax scheme is, it applies only to electric vehicles. So historically, I should take a step back and set more context. Historically, states and cities have passed gas taxes to fund roadway infrastructure. It's a pretty simple idea. If you're buying gas, that means you're probably fueling a vehicle that you then put on the roadway. And so it sort of is a rough proxy for roadway consumption. And so if we tax gas usage, it's a way of sort of taxing the people that are availing themselves of those roads. And so what you've seen in states like Virginia and Hawaii is they've passed a VMT to replace the gas tax because EVs don't purchase gas, but they do contribute to road use and road wear. And so you've seen other states basically use a VMT as a replacement for the gas tax as it relates to electric vehicles. But our VMT is not only doing that, it's also acting as like the surcharge that you see in the typical taxi cab, limousine, and ride-hailing, ride-share industries. Those typically have like a flat fee surcharge and then also some mileage surcharge. And so our VMT is also covering that side of the equation, which is why it's relatively high. But I think the exact number is going to be up for debate. One of the biggest concerns we've heard about AVs is that it will pull riders away from public transit, contribute to traffic congestion, and contribute to, well, not carbon emissions necessarily, but roadway usage and congestion. And so one of the things our bill does is all of the revenue associated with AV operations that the district collects through either the VMT or the permitting fees, 50% of that revenue gets earmarked for investments in WMATA and public transit. So that's another piece of the bill. Another concern that we heard when we were drafting the bill is how it might displace the existing taxi, limousine, ride hail, and ride share industry workers. And so the other thing that, the other place that revenue goes, the other 50% goes to a workforce development fund to help support those potentially displaced workers. And then the final big concern, and we worked on the provisions in this bill alongside the Trial Lawyers Association, is just how our basic rules of traffic safety and how legal liability would apply to AVs. So a lot of our rules, safe driving, you know, lane merging, all those things, presume that a human driver is there to get the ticket. So how do our laws adapt for the fact that there may not be a human in a vehicle at all? Similarly, you know, for a collision, you know, if I bump into another vehicle and I refuse to, you know, give my insurance to the other person or pay for the damages, they would sue me. And they would sue me under a theory of negligence generally, that, you know, I broke my duty of care by unsafely operating my vehicle, and that resulted in damage to their property or injury to them personally. With AVs, there's a risk that that very simple negligence lawsuit has to morph into this incredibly complex products liability case where you're now looking at source code and pulling in expert witnesses, and that will take what would normally be a 2 or 3 year trial and extend it to like a 5 to 10 year timeline without really any improvement, or there's no real rationale for that. And so what the bill does is it sort of streamlines how you would treat how you would handle those cases by basically designating the AV, the automated driving system, as the driver for the purposes of liability. So that's kind of a very quick overview of what our bill does. We have a hearing on Monday. I assume a lot of these aspects will change or will sort of be adjusted in light of the feedback we get. But that's a sort of quick overview.
Thanks so much, Kevin. And Jonathan, maybe you could just give a little bit of insight onto DFHV's thinking about this, and then we will return back to both of you with some questions.
Sure. Thanks, Kelly, and thanks, Kevin, for the overview. Kevin's the expert, so he obviously covered a lot on what the bill proposes, and we will be participating in the hearing. So, you know, can't can't divulge too much of our testimony, I guess, ahead of time, though we'll be sharing that. But I think AVs, while of course they have some, totally new and unique aspects to them, we try to see this, new form of passenger service, at least, through the same lens that we do all for-hire transportation, and our mission. Things we want to encourage within that are safety, of course, but then also accessibility and affordability. And so that's really, the lens we apply first and foremost when we think about AVs. Some of you might be aware that last month we had a roundtable on the overall state of the for-hire industry with Brian Nadeau's committee. And so I think we identified a lot of things that we'd like to see improved with the current landscape and what operators provide, not the least of which is accessibility, wheelchair accessible vehicles and services like that. So really, I think our perspective is coming from, to the greatest extent possible, we want to sort of unify and right size all the rules in the space, and including holding any passenger service in these various potential phases of deployment. We want the AVs to be meeting that standard as well, so that we actually are seeing some improvements, whether it's filling gaps in the transportation network or a more accessible transportation system overall. We want to, build that in upfront as much as possible. We will speak to some of the concerns around labor and, displacement of people whose jobs are currently in the rideshare or taxi business. But I think, I think there's a lot of consensus around promoting all the potential good things that AVs could bring, and limiting and mitigating and discouraging any of the unintended consequences or bad things. So I don't think we're that far apart on the potential and the risks. But like I said, I think today we really don't want to see unnecessary traffic congestion because a Lyft vehicle is just circling around. It has a driver in it today, but could be having all these negative externalities that we don't really think about all the time. And we would feel the same about AVs. So I would like to see the early deployment actually serve neighborhoods that are underserved today, or knowing that the technology isn't fully developed with the vehicles to do true wheelchair service with no human operator from the rideshare company involved. Well, maybe like the requirements that the taxis have today, there would be some sort of equal service that needs to be provided until that technology is available. Because I think I don't have to tell anyone on this call that folks want to have equal access to that. And so to the extent there are, safety benefits or, other improvements that AVs bring in the near term, like we want equitable access to that. So I think those are the most relevant topics that we will bring up. But like I said, I think, we want to see a pathway to deployment. DFHV wants to continue to regulate the for-hire service that we do. And, we'll, of course, be working with DDOT on the pieces that they're the technical experts on. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks. Before we move on to questions, I just want to note that we do intend on inviting DDOT back to talk about what they're doing as far as AVs go in the fall. We have met with them before, so we are trying to circulate with everyone and get everyone talking about these issues. Karthik and Matthew, I thought maybe see if you have any questions to start.
I think I'll definitely defer to Kelly here. I mean, I'll just kind of voice my own. I've got a very strong interest in seeing autonomous vehicles reduce the reckless driving and all of the dangerous behaviors that are engaged in daily. But at the same time, we want to make sure that some of the behaviors that have been documented by autonomous vehicles, like not stopping at crosswalks, or like exceeding the speed limit, or like entering bike lanes to drop people off. These are behaviors that are not codified in law. But then, kind of the most important thing as it relates to this council is that we definitely do not want innovation to leave folks with disabilities, especially folks in wheelchairs, behind. And there's already a significant there's already kind of significant issues that folks face accessing ride-hailing vehicles, and just to have a phenomenal new technology take over and leave folks behind is not the start that we want. We know that there are places around the country and around the world who have successfully deployed autonomous vehicles that are fully accessible. So it is possible. And some cities, and might as well be us, ideally should kind of put our foot down and say, hey, we're excited about this innovation, but this innovation needs to be fully inclusive. And maybe spin some Google brain cycles to try to actually make their vehicles accessible. So that's all I would add. Kelly has been kind of the spearheading the AV effort, so I'll defer to her, but this is I'm fully behind her.
Thanks so much, Karthik. And Matthew, I just remembered that you can hear us, but you can't be on audio. So if you have any questions, drop them into the chat and I will raise them up. I think I just wanted to start out by asking what provisions for accessibility are currently in the bill so that we are all aware on this meeting.
Yeah, the only mention of accessibility in the introduced version was to make sure that the on-demand transportation, so like the app itself, would be usable by multiple users. And so I think this is one where casting a wider net has already been super helpful. So when we held both our roundtable a couple years ago, the one slice of the disability community that showed up in large numbers was the visually impaired or blind community. And I think there's lots of ways why that technology sort of straightforwardly speaks to sort of that population. I think in the last couple of weeks, and I think Kelly, when you and I talked last week, we need to do a lot more to make sure that this includes wheelchair users or people with mobility challenges, where I think the presence of a human driver has actually helped sort of alleviate some of the friction with accessing rideshare ride hailing. And so this is a sort of a missing link when it comes to the AV side of things. And that can be both speaking to the types of vehicles that are employed and that they at least have the capacity to accommodate a wheelchair user. I think to the more ambitious one of like, what are the sort of the self-locking capabilities to make sure that those a wheelchair can be safely locked in the vehicle while it's traveling too. And so I would welcome testimony in that, just so that we can include that in our revised markup of the bill. And this is also one where, I think in a lot of other debates, there is a tension, not to say that it's justified, but there's a tension between the cost associated with some of these things and the ability to provide the service sustainably. I don't think we're in that situation here. These are extraordinarily well-resourced companies. It's the Google, it's Amazon. And so I think we can be demanding to make sure that this technology meets the needs of our residents without worrying about if it pencils out for these companies. Like, it's going to pencil out. We could just be, I think, bolder in what we're asking for them.
That's helpful. Let's start taking questions from the public. And if people would raise their hands, I'll just start calling. And I'll give a moment for that. Don't be shy. This is a friendly meeting. Well, I can start with CT. Are you ready? Okay, sorry, I caught you mid bite.
I'm just trying to give time. I'll try to get all my stuff out of the way so I can be quiet after that. Kevin, it's good to see you again. Thank you for talking with us last week. I wanted to make sure, and thank you, Kelly, for your tremendous leadership on this, and really everybody on the MAAC. Thank you so much, and Jonathan as well. I want to make sure people saw or know about a list of policy solutions that Kelly and other disability advocates are proposing as a way to, and I think some of them are pretty light lifts and should be, not a big deal, to make sure that they are accessible and equitable, the AVs. Going to Jonathan's comment about the level setting with current on-demand, I fully support that. That's not in there, but it is fully support. And noting that if they are coming into the market and they're not providing any wheelchair accessible service, they are definitely increasing the tremendous gaps between availability of on-demand service, and noting that in the past year, it has been harder to get around as a disabled person in DC, and thinking about WMATA and I'm putting in quotes, a better bus service thing, or they cut 500 of the bus stops that are so incredibly important for disabled people, including the one by the hospital. So it's just been bad. So this will make it worse if accessibility isn't at the forefront. And while there's the requirement to be able to request an accessible ride, we know, and I think we said this when we talked to you, Kevin, history has shown that companies, even if they have the money, will not provide accessible service unless they're required to do it. We just can't find a single example in history. It just doesn't happen. And so I am begging and pleading for DC to do the right thing. I guess Kelly put in there, so I'm just going to mention a few of the things. An additional concern that we have is detection and response, and making sure that the vehicles are able to detect disabled people, especially wheelchair users and people who might have a mobility device like a walker or a service animal. And there have been a lot of research and anecdotes and conversations I've had with people that work in the industry of the operators not testing enough with those cases for the vehicles to be able to identify disabled people. And so we've really been asking everywhere we can for there to be standards and requirements and proof. The DREDF is based in the Bay, so we have a lot of anecdotes. And so, our staff member's mom uses a service animal, has almost been hit by Waymos there. So I just want to put that forward as a real strong concern, and something that I'll definitely put in my testimony, but I hope can be discussed. And then two other things. Waymo, we know in other markets, will provide wheelchair accessible service, but they do it in a non-AV vehicle. So it'll have a driver and be like a van. I think that is required by law. If you're going to operate as a private entity, you have to provide at least that at a minimum. But there's no requirement or assurance that all of the operators are going to be doing that, or going to be providing that. And I just ask that that be considered. But also point to not knowing if that is actually getting us equitable service, if that service, because it requires a driver, will be available for all of the times that an AV would be available. So if you could request on the app, because there's no driver, something, a ride, an AV ride 24/7, I don't know if that's the plan, but if you could, can you do that with the driver that is providing the wheelchair accessible service? Are they providing it in the same hours? And are there the same wait times? So in our policy solutions, we have a request to include in the requirements that the companies provide data on the trip requests that they get for accessible service, when those happen, if they're fulfilled, and the wait times, just to check and see, like, are you actually providing equitable service in the district, even if you're providing this alternative option, and that there be plans in the future to provide fully accessible AVs for all the reasons that an AV can be better, including safety. And we know that automated securement is getting, there's a lot of research, there's a whole coalition with the disability community and operators called the Secure Ride, and we're working on federal funding for research. Like, that's all being taken care of. We just need commitments from the operators that they're actually going to do something, and support from the district government and council to hold them to account. And finally, I just suggest, I'm really glad to hear about the earmarks and funding for transit, that could also be used for funding for accessible infrastructure and public rights of way. So thinking about sidewalks and curb cuts and crosswalks and everything, that if you really want to make sure that AVs are providing the most benefit for disabled people, blind, deaf, people with sensory disabilities, people who are all three, like, which happens, then we need accessible sidewalks, curb cuts, all of those things. And that is something that these companies who are going to be making money in the district could be helping to fund as well. So I want to be quiet. I'd be really curious, like, others' thoughts about these proposals that we have, if you think they're viable, and really curious to hear from others. So thank you.
Kevin and Jonathan, any feedback on that?
I mean, I think those are all great proposals. Obviously, I'm not in the position now to make commitments on what finally lands in the bill, but those all seem perfectly reasonable asks to me. A sort of tangential issue that it raised for me that I think I put before you all to consider. I have no real thoughts or on it myself right now, but the AV bill has also been a proxy for the battle on automation itself writ large. And so we've gotten outreach from certain union sectors that say, hey, we're worried about the ways AVs are going to displace us in public transit settings. So, like, right now the red line is automating. Who's going to lose a job associated with that? Now, that's not an AV really, but it's automation sort of large. Where I do think there's an interesting overlap is, like, for paratransit services. And what I don't want to say is we're going to create this box of paratransit that's a totally separate system for people with disabilities. I don't think that's the ask here. But I do wonder if once we have AVs that are becoming accessible for people with disabilities in a sort of like a private ride-hailing context, to what extent we encourage or require automation in traditional paratransit service, if that's even desirable. I have no real priors on that one, but I've had, on the other side, for the people who do the driving, they've said, please don't automate this industry. And I think that's, I kind of want to center that conversation on the needs of the population that are the riders, not necessarily the workforce there, although I'm sympathetic to the issue. So again, that's not really part of AV deployment, part and parcel, but I think it's a related conversation. And so with the thought leaders on this call, I just wanted to put it on your radar in case that's a conversation you all have later that could inform some of our work there. But that was something that came to mind there. But I think, CT, a lot of what you mentioned there makes a lot of sense, and we should be trying to be as ambitious in what we ask for in terms of what percentage of the fleet can be wheelchair accessible, or if it's not even a percentage, we just do it by result. So we say, I don't care how many you have, as long as you're providing wait times that are consistent with the general riding population, maybe that's satisfactory too. And so there's kind of a couple of different ways of achieving the same result. And one is sort of a process-based one, or like an inventory-based one. And one might just be simply like, I'm agnostic on how you get there, but if I get calls saying, hey, wheelchair users are waiting twice or quadruple the time, that's sort of a sign that the system isn't working itself. So Those are sort of my initial responses, but I think it's worth a longer conversation.
Thanks, Kevin. I want to jump in, respond to a couple things. So I think the point that CT made about hours and equivalency of service is super helpful, because right now the experience with for hire is very limited hours and very long waits. And so we want to be aiming, I think, for both a certain level of service, equivalent service, really. And then part of that, in my experience, it does require a certain percentage of fleet. So we know from a friend who recently went to New York, they were hailing waves right from the street. You know, this is unheard of in the American experience in American cities with wheelchair users. When I go abroad in London or Scotland, all the cabs have ramps. So I think we need to, we need to hit that sweet spot of having enough vehicles on the road to be able to provide equivalent service. I don't know if Jonathan had anything to add. If not, then I'll move on to the next person with their hand raised.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Heather, I think that was you.
Thank you. I wanted to raise two issues, one related to detection and pedestrian safety, and the second to outreach and government accountability on who understands what's going on. The first, at the Pedestrian Advisory Council for years now, Sergeant Terry Thorne, our MPD rep, has been reiterating the efforts that MPD is making at the uncontrolled crosswalks. Those are the white striped areas where there is not a traffic light. And so there's a huge investment there to try to essentially train people and bring in revenue by punishing them when people are violating that sort of basic process. So one of the questions is the detection around and this is probably a Kevin question, detection around uncontrolled crosswalks. And related to that, there's also been the introduction of rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Those are the little beacons that go yellow when you push the button, and it allows you to cross the street. So that's another detection issue. On the issue of older adults in particular, I'm not a member, but I attend most all of the DC Commission on Aging meetings. And actually, I was the one who suggested 2 months ago that they might want to have a topic on AVs. And so DDOT came the following month. The director of the Department of Aging brings in some very good speakers from different agencies. And I would say the presentation was just not at all suited to the audience. And so this raises the issue of, I would say probably 3/4 of the people don't know the acronym AV. That's a starting point. And so we have a tremendous understanding gap before you even get to the technology, the levels and so forth. And so I think that is a major, major issue. And I think it'd be really important to know, if there hasn't been outreach already to the senior wellness centers. I would say that the vast majority of people that I work with have no idea that the hearing is coming up. And I know the onus isn't, but to me, it's not a question of education. It's a government being accountable for what it introduces into the public space. Thanks.
Yeah, my point well taken here, Heather. I'm not familiar enough with the technology to say what gaps there are with detection at some of the sort of like unsignaled crosswalks or like with hawk signals and things like that. I think the technology is fairly robust when it comes to detection. So in case like they can detect, for example, when like a person is jaywalking and they're occupying a lane there, even though there's not a crosswalk. I think ultimately the question is kind of like your mileage may vary based on sort of the novelty of the situation the AV finds itself in. So an AV finds itself in the floodwaters for the first time because it didn't test enough in those types of conditions. And so I think it's something to be aware of. I don't know. I think it's going to be an open question as to how prescriptive the bill is in outlining sort of like a benchmarking for what's like enough safety looks like versus whether or not it delegates that kind of determination to DDOT, where they have people that are sort of a little bit more technical experts on these sorts of issues. So that'll be sort of like a drafting question as we sort of encounter it. I will say that I don't know if anyone here joined the Families for Safe Streets AV forum a few weeks ago. So one of the fascinating conversations that they're having there is what is safe enough for AVs. So if you look at our bill, I think what I came up with is it's got to be at least as safe as a human driver across as it relates to different roadway users. I think there are conversations about whether or not that standard should really be closer to like 10 times the standard of a human driver, or even 100 times the safety of a human driver. Now, then there's a question of like, how is that measured? Is that like collisions versus miles traveled, or fatalities versus miles traveled, or some sort of formulaic algorithmic determination of what, you know, a human driver's risk is versus what an AV's risk is? I'm sure if there's any industry that has a great sense of what the risks are, it's probably like the insurance industry, where they have actuaries that are like doing the math on this. So I think one is like, what is your standard for what is safe enough? Is it as long as it's better than a human, that's enough for me to want to have that technology on the roads? Is it the 10x? Is it the 100x? And then like, what does it mean if the technology plateaus at a certain level of safety below the benchmark we've set? So like, what if after whatever algorithm we come up with, Waymo is assessed at being only 9 times safer than a human driver? Is it worth holding back the technology to see that gain to the next level, or is there some comfort we may have with seeing them on the roads too? That's sort of a novel question that was presented to me on that forum, and I haven't had other discussions with people since then, but I want to put that out there, because then there's also a question of like safety with respect to which type of roadway user. It may be that they're excellent with respect to navigating collisions or avoiding collisions with other cars, at the risk of increasing their likelihood of colliding with another roadway user, whether that's a biker or a pedestrian, or any other type of roadway user. And so, you know, we're sort of at some point, you're getting to the trolley problem of like, who's bearing the risk during a certain sort of dangerous incident. And I think we have to have some sort of comfort with what the standard is when we're sort of assessing the relative risks there. That's really sort of like a giant complication I'm setting at the table here. I don't really have any answers to that one quite yet.
Karthik, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of also, this is a concept that we brought up before. We already have a 2-track or 2-tiered system of transportation in the district. Basically, folks that drive and folks that can't drive. And folks that drive can get to places 2.5 times faster than people who cannot drive. So if you look at public transit versus a car, and ride hailing is a short circuit for getting someone who can't operate a car to get the speed of a car. So essentially getting away from that 2.5 times penalty. But we know that even within that, there's a 2-track system. So we know that folks in wheelchairs, for example, cannot access getting from point A to point B using ride hail anywhere near as efficiently as someone without a wheelchair. So there is that 2-track system. And I think, you know, that might be a good North Star for us, is with the addition of AVs, we cannot exacerbate that ride hail discrepancy. However they want to fix it. Ideally, in my mind, what we really would love to see, or what I would love to see, is real innovation that comes from the big operators that's focused on making real AVs, or like true AVs, not just a van that's accessible that's driven by a manual operator, but actual real AVs that allow for power wheelchairs and non-power wheelchairs to access true AV technology and have that and have operators compete on that service. Because once we get that type of penetration, then we've eliminated the issue. And this is just kind of the worry that is like in the back of my mind, that is, I'm very excited for this technology, but like this cannot leave folks behind. Anyway, I mean, the reason I bring this up is just kind of tying it back to the time tax of like, there's already a 2-track, and ideally, maybe this crosses over into getting autonomous buses, which I would really love to see, because that would drastically increase the amount of service that Metrobus can provide. And maybe we don't even need to worry about this in 20 years, because we've got such high quality autonomous buses that nobody even uses ride hail anymore. That's where I'd kind of love to see the market and the district go.
Thanks, Karthik. Angelo, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I just had a question. Thank you for letting me speak, and thank you, Evan, for laying out everything, and Jonathan as well. So yeah, like I mentioned before, I lived in San Francisco previously. So I actually have been riding Waymo since 2023, and I was just looking at my app, and I've had 68 rides, a little over 200 miles. So very, I'm a proponent of AVs, but I'm also still in that sense skeptical and cautious. Yeah, like piggybacking off of Heather and your response about kind of like the trolley problem and quantifying that, I just wanted to clarify. So there's really no language and policy or any advisory or any conversations you've had with Waymo or any of the other robo-taxi providers about kind of like quantifying this. I'll give you kind of an example. Is when I would ride and walk in San Francisco, it was kind of a joke between people that live there. It's just like, if you walk in front of a Waymo, it'll stop, right? Mm-hmm. It's very cautious. But I'd ride in San Francisco and then ride in Phoenix, when I go to visit my friends. And I noticed, at least anecdotally, the Waymos in Phoenix are, for lack of, I'll use the word, more bold. It's less pedestrian friendly. A lot of people drive. And so it seemed as if it made more bold choices. Like, I'm never going to make this turn if I don't cut it a little bit closer. And again, I can't quantify this. I don't have like the Waymo source code, and I wasn't doing any sort of like timings or anything, but it definitely felt like in Phoenix compared to San Francisco, it was more bold. So yeah, I just wanted to see if, and to clarify if maybe we're talking about the same thing. There's no like quantification or like policy around this. And if not, then maybe we should keep that in mind, given we're a very pedestrian and multimodal city compared to Phoenix, and on par with San Francisco. So yeah, I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I will talk a little bit, and then feel free to follow up if I misunderstood you. But so there's no, I think each of these operators has data because they like to brag how safe their rides are. So I think they have some sense in which they've been able to quantify how safe they are. I think they typically do that by miles without an incident. It's kind of one very basic way of doing it. That's like, I would say that's the most obvious way of doing it. That's probably imperfect. So like, what if the Waymo didn't strike anyone, but it was going really? there are incidences other than collisions that contribute to feelings or actual lack of safety. Maybe didn't collide with a bike rider, but it was occupying a bike lane. That's not like a collision in any event, but I think that's unsafe behavior that I want to sort of go on their ledger when I'm calculating how safe they are. I do think you're right, and that's one of the things we do in the bill is we actually allow DDOT to suspend or deny applications based off of conduct in another jurisdiction. But I think one of the things we'll want to figure out is like, where are your models training, and how DC specific is that model? And which is, you know, not to keep doing asides here, one of the things one theory that someone had is if AVs are training based off of what they see, is there a chance that they're going to start learning bad human behavior and start mimicking that? You know, so that's one risk. But then it's also like, what if there's a particular culture in another city where an AV is that impacts how it's learning there, that then gets sort of imported into DC into contexts that don't make much sense. And so I think we as makers have to understand better a little bit what's under the hood. I think it's going to be, that's where it starts getting complicated from like a trade and proprietary secret sort of equation. But I think also we can formulate our own philosophy of what safety means in the context of an AVs, and we premise their entrance into the market on that formula. Well, they're going to want to make money, and they're going to ask, and they might say, oh, here's some challenges with that, and here's why maybe what you're saying is too aspirational or whatever. But I think we can formulate our own sense of what that might look like and just ask them to meet it. And maybe they keep some secrets, but they have to at least prove to us and to the Department of Transportation satisfaction that it's safe enough, whatever that looks like. But please feel free to follow up and sort of hone in on the question based off of that sort of meandering response there.
Thanks so much. CT.
Hi, thanks again. So I just wanted to jump in on something that Kevin and Kartik, you both mentioned on the buses and accessibility. And so actually, US DOT has been funding and working on automated buses and shuttles that would provide paratransit for longer than the passenger vehicle stuff. It has been so well funded, and they have a plan. And they've been moving. I've been to a lot of panel presentations on their progress. I don't know where it is lately, because I honestly have not been to DOT as much this past year and a half, but I'll put a link for anybody that doesn't know. But there's been so much done, and it's easier actually because they already have, for the most part, the lifts, and so they're going to be wheelchair accessible. And automated securement is easier in a bus and a shuttle because it's usually driving slower. You have there's just lots of factors where the automated securement, the Q straight, quantum Q straight. I never remember the order. Like it exists already, and the problem is that you have to, I think, if you're a chair user, travel backwards, which is very uncomfortable. So there's for some of us. There's an alternative that a group called Secure Rides Coalition is working on with the industry, called the UDIG. So that's all done, and it's real. It's already exists in the paratransit space, or at least the shuttle space that would provide paratransit as well. MAAC Mobility they learned early on that they were going to have to provide wheelchair access. They had some back and forths, and they've done good and worked with the disability community and others. So that's all out there. And I would say, and I shared this already, but I'll just say it in this group, that for DREDA's perspective and other disability folks that I've talked to, I won't speak for anybody else but us, we believe that on paratransit and transit, even if there's not a driver, there needs to be personnel on board to assist with everything, but ensuring safety for everyone, disabled, non-disabled people, not as police officers, safety, wayfinding, like where are we, if there's an emergency, what is happening. We know from Waymos and how they operate that having the person in the Philippines is not enough. If there's an emergency, needs somebody on board to help. And in transit and paratransit, that's going to be really essential, helping with wayfinding on finding the vehicle, knowing where people are, if you have groceries, those sorts of things. But I would say also in the disability context and paratransit, it is so important to have a person on board just for that human connection and time. You could have people who rely on paratransit, and that might be, one of their few times to actually get to sit and talk with somebody on that drive. And you'll have a lot of disabled people who are very, very isolated, and we need that. And I worked for a lot of years for unions. I'm very pro-union, and I want those jobs, but I also think that that's some of the most important work that a driver does, is providing that connection with the riders, whether they're disabled or not. So I'd hope that that could exist and that it would be well paid and be seen as like really valuable work and assistance. In terms of detection, I just want to share in my world and being in spaces with the industry that training for the vehicles, disabled people as pedestrians or people outside the vehicle are honestly treated as edge cases. And that data is just not there. It's not forced. They're not creating it. There may not be as many disabled people out in the city or where they're doing the testing for them. And so it is so important to make sure that we're not treated like that, and that they can prove that these vehicles can detect somebody who's using a wheelchair, using a walker, using a service animal, using a manual chair and using their foot to propel backwards, which is what I need to do when I'm using a chair, because I just have the one hand, and so I have to go up a hill, I have to go backwards. But that has been shown, in a model, it was shown that when the vehicle saw that, it actually sped up instead of stopping. So I am very nervous. And that's in a brief that Dread published, but those are our concerns. And just the last thing, I'm really glad that, Kevin, that you're talking to the trial attorneys and that there's all of those discussions, and I know thoughtfulness around liability. I'm just thinking, if there are crashes, and we're not going to get the data and how many crashes are there with disabled people unless that's asked for, because they're not collecting that, I don't think, but wheelchair users, others. But if there is a crash, and hopefully the disabled person, the wheelchair user, survives and is okay, but maybe their wheelchair isn't, and it's been harmed and isn't working. A wheelchair user can't wait years for that for assistance and the funding and whatever they need to get their wheelchair replaced or repaired. That just is a quality of life issue and can stop everything. So I just ask that also be considered. So thank you very much for letting me babble.
Thanks, CT. I want to go back a moment and just also highlight something Director Rogers was talking about that I appreciate, was that the idea of looking at the whole kind of on-demand transportation environment in DC, and how we can use this opportunity to kind of look at the big view to make everything better. I think if we're looking at deploying autonomous vehicles in the near future, that needs to be a part of that picture and integrated together in the planning and in requirements, in enforcement, and looking at it holistically. And I just wanted to raise that up because I thought that's a really important point to be made. And I don't know if you had anything more to add on that, Director Rogers. Feel free.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty simply the concept. We over the years, I think we've developed this patchwork of rules and regulations for hire service, and it's very fragmented. And so I don't want it to go further in that direction, I guess. And then, like I said, I think, there's certainly new aspects that will need to be regulated with AVs, but a lot of the things we all care about have been at play for, the last 12 years. And so I just think now is the time to, if there's going to be, I kind of rambled on and on about this at our hearing with Adele, but why don't we have one standard for X and Y and Z? If it's accessibility, why doesn't one standard apply to everything? If it's pricing, all these different dimensions of how for hire service should work. Why would a taxi do it differently than a human driven Uber versus a driverless Uber, unless it's something very related to the fact that there is no human driver or something. So I think that's just what we'd like to see.
Great,
Yeah,
that's really helpful. Go ahead, Kevin.
I think we're also operating from a place where, we threw in a couple of things that apply specifically to AVs, but I think once we sort of land the plan on what, like, for example, a vehicle miles travel tax will look like in the AV context, I think the next immediate question is then, to what extent should this displace existing surcharges or fees that we assess in the traditional industry too? And that applies both ways. I think, again, like, to what extent should the standard for wheelchair access and GNCs get carried over to AVs? And ultimately, I think everyone in the industry sort of wants everyone in the industry says publicly what they want is a fair playing field. I'm sure privately they would love to have some advantages against their competitors, but that's unpopular to say in public. And so I think as long as we treat them all fairly, I am not invested after that into how much, like, if it puts one of them out of business, but it's a standard that all the others seem to have been able to integrate into their operations, that seems to me like a perfectly fine outcome there. CT, I just wanted to, on the what happens for property damage in the case of an AV, I think what jumped to my mind was, that's a great thought. I wonder what happens in the current ride hail or ride share space on that one. And so if there's an existing policy in that space that you think is a good model, let me know. I could also see this as a problem that just hasn't been resolved in any of the contexts that we're talking about right now. But I know this is a good one.
Thanks so much. One of the things I wanted to flag is there has been a proposal that I've supported, and that is a charge on non-waves, so non-accessible operating vehicles in the on-demand service to go to support a wave service. And I think CT brought something up similar about that, possibly for autonomous vehicles that are not accessible, to contribute to a fund that would support wave vehicles. So just another aspect to think about: how do we level the playing field and also help support equal service? Are there any other questions from folks? If not, I think it would be helpful to hear what would be helpful for people here to do next. Go to the hearing, submit testimony. If you could speak to that and what you kind of foresee in the next few months as far as this bill progresses, how we can engage and give you good feedback.
Yeah. So I think some of the things you already mentioned are the most immediate, which is I think registration for our hearing is actually just closed, right when we got on the call. But if a few folks do want to sign up and aren't able to, you can send me an email and I can add you to the witness list. I'll let you know what are we currently at for Monday in terms of total registration.
You were at 80 an hour ago.
Oh my gosh, it's always 80. Yeah, it's always a sprint the final day. I think we were at like 45 yesterday. It's gonna be a long day. I think after, if you can't join on Monday, then submitting written testimony is also a fantastic way of getting your opinions recorded. I think what will happen afterwards is there are components of the bill that I will then sort of convene different stakeholder groups to address. So I will meet with Waymo and Zoox and Tesla and all them to talk about, here are some operational realities that the bill doesn't speak to, and try to think through those. I'll be meeting with like urbanism and public transit people to talk about how we're, how we're not undermining public transit by, allowing more vehicles on our roads that could pull people away from it. But then I also want to have lots of conversations with the disability community about ways that we can make this more accessible. My impression, and again, I don't, disability community isn't a monolith, and even within specific disabilities, people can have different perspectives. I will say, I think again, I mentioned before, blind and visually impaired community has been sort of the most pronounced supporters of this bill. Now that's been at a national level, so some of the national organizations and advocacy groups that speak to there. But I think having a broad range of people who have accessibility challenges, mobility challenges, inform our draft of the bill will be a huge step. And so I think at some point, at least once or twice over the summer, I would love to meet with you all and a wider collection of advocates on some of the things you'd like to see changed in the bill. And as someone who does not identify as disabled myself, I think having as broad and diverse a coalition as possible will help me to make sure that I'm sort of hearing the full range of perspectives there. So to the extent you all, I will probably reach out to this body to help sort of pull together a list of folks who I should also include in those conversations. But I expect that to happen maybe mid-August or late July after our hearing.
Great, super helpful. Is there anything else on this topic for the moment? We will be in touch. Thanks, everyone. Really good questions and discussions. Do we want to return, Karthik, to the bus update? All right. Thank you all for joining. Jonathan, Kevin, Faye, Lindsay. Thank you so much, and we'll see you Monday. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm going to drop off to help get my kid down for bedtime, but thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm happy to come back out at some point to talk more about it.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll look forward to that.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. So I think for bus update, is that you, Zach?
Yep. I'll share my screen. All right. So I worked with Jamie on the bus priority team just to get an update of some of the projects and where they are since we last met. And I can share this list in the chat too. And I think we'll work to have it developed or at least edited each time I give this update. But for the most part, I think I just want to draw everyone's attention to some of the projects that were complete. We have the MLK Junior Avenue Southeast. There was a construction on the MLK Howard Road intersection. Minnesota Avenue Southeast is now preparing for construction. And so that's Minnesota Avenue. That's between Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast and Marion Barry Avenue Southeast in Ward 7. Nanny Helen Burroughs, we anticipate upcoming construction as well there. Georgia Avenue Northwest design is currently under review. U Street NOI will be issued at 65% design. A new one for H Street Northeast. This project will be incorporated into the Gold Line BRT project. So I anticipate there will be some more discussion as that comes about. Let's see what else he updated here. I think that's pretty much it, and I can work with that team to provide a more comprehensive update, especially on H Street Northeast. I think that's a sort of a major development coming out of our bus priority team as we move forward here.
We're excited about everything BRT, bus lanes, and especially BRT. So this is fantastic. Zach, can you send this? So one thing that the BAC does is they send out with the meeting agenda, they send out like the DDOT update for bike lanes. So if you can send this maybe for next month, a couple days before, that way we can get this out with the meeting invite. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and personally, I think that I'm super excited about BRT. It's going to be our first BRT in the district, and I think it can really, really be a fantastic thing. Cool.
This is great. Karthik, should we ask if there's any other public comment? I'm sorry, I should look at the agenda. General public discussion, yes. All right. So any other topics, things we should be thinking about, add to our future meetings? I think I mentioned reaching out to DDOT for maybe talking AVs in the fall. Maybe I don't remember exactly our month, our schedule, but maybe September or October.
Yeah, I
Would
think
make
so. I need
sense.
to coordinate with
Neil,
Mayo on.
you got
So,
it.
but I think let's see. Okay, so actually, so for August, we've got folks confirmed. So just to confirm with Zach, we've got curbside coming next month in August. Okay, perfect.
Hey, that's perfect too.
Is also yes,
It's very relevant. Yes,
very relevant. Very relevant. I don't know actually. So Zach, do they have our ADA Pudo letter?
Yes, and
Okay.
I will make sure they have it before the meeting.
Okay, cool. Because I think that's kind of among many things that I think would be great to talk with them about, and also probably very relevant to AV, eventual AV deployment as well. Yeah, that's all I had on. I think general. That's all that I had on my deck. But it looks like there's some other questions as well.
Heather, I think you're first.
I haven't learned where chat is. Otherwise, I would have put this into chat. I need to learn that, Zach. So I had 3 bus rides on July 4th, and one very impressive bus driver, operator, who's 66 years old. Her whole route is upper Northwest, and we had probably a 20-minute conversation on the tweaking that continues within WMATA on changes, and she has continued to insist that her regular customers were still used to the missed bus stops. And so I found it quite encouraging and a little bit unknown that there's still tweaking and opportunities for, to put it one way, advocacy for continued changes in the bus priority project. And Zach, I wondered if that has come up in the bus priority team within DDOT, and whether that priority team is a channel for such requested changes. I was thinking, for example, the Brightview Spanish-speaking Vida Senior Center, where they're still discombobulated by the removal of 2 bus stops.
I will say it does come up quite a bit. I mean, more so probably with WMATA than it does our bus priority team. But I can bring that up to the team and see if they have a better response than I can give about that.
The issue would be, who is there a person in charge of or heading up the bus priority team to whom people could direct such requests, for example?
I mean, there's Megan and Jamie who lead the team, but I can find out who would be the best point of contact for those requests.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry I joined a few minutes late. I was experiencing technical difficulties. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you. And thanks for joining.
Great. Yeah, this is Sarah Rod. I am on the WMATA AAC, and I wasn't going to comment, but since that last question just came up, I will say that absolutely you can bring those things to the AAC Bus and Rail Subcommittee. There are changes being made. There are ways to advocate for changes. I don't know how successful anything is going to be, but we are more than happy to carry some of that water for you if people want to come to us with complaints or specific proposals or things like that, and make sure it gets into that whole better bus planning. We have heard a number of complaints about it since it started, and there is a chance at least to get things updated. I also wanted to follow up on Karthik's comment mentioning the PUDOs and the other proposals that you all brought to us. I believe some of you were online and saw that the AAC did express our support for those proposals. Unfortunately, the one with I'm sorry, the signs at the bus stops on the ground. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten the
Horizontal wayfinding.
horizontal. Yep. Thank you. Wayfind. I was going vertical. That's not it. Anyway, there was discussion within the WMATA staff, so it's legal side, that might not fall into something we are actually able to comment on. We're pushing back and trying to figure out exactly what they're talking about, but you certainly have the moral support of the AAC on those things, but we've never done this before in terms of like giving an endorsement. So we're working our way through the actual administrative / legal process of the whole thing. But I just wanted to give you an update on that. And Sandy apologizes
Thank
for not being
you.
here.
Oh, say hi to Sandy and thank you for that kind of the support, moral, or whatever else you can get. Can you remind us what would be the best way to get that kind of feedback to the AAC? Should we? And I'm going to also plug. You have a meeting, I think Monday.
We do indeed. So the Bus and Rail Subcommittee will be meeting on Monday between 4 and 6, and you can find the link online, or you can reach out to Sandy or me, and we'll be happy to send it to you or resend it to you. So you can show up at one of our meetings and make a comment during the public comments. You could send written items to, we do actually have an email address. I don't want to quote it because I'll probably get it wrong, but it is definitely online. Or you could send emails to Sandy or I to then redirect up the chain, that sort of thing. So there's a number of different ways of doing it.
That's great. I plan on being at the Monday meeting, and I think that the agenda is going to include someone talking about the new Metro car. And I just want to say, I think it's still open. It is down on the mall, I think. And I actually went and really enjoyed both the blast from the past going in the very old cars. I was feeling very nostalgic for orange carpet. And the new car I thought was beautiful to see in person. And there was a lot of WMATA staff there, so I was chatting with them. And I said, I really appreciate this, but I'm still worried about the boarding gap. So,
Yes.
so that's something they can't replicate on their beautiful mall display. But I appreciate that they said we're thinking about that and working on addressing it. So, but anyway, I think there'll be more discussion on Monday's meeting, and anyone who's available should definitely try to tune into that.
That's great. Thank you for the plug. Yes, there will be a discussion of that. I will say the AAC, a number of us were taken on a semi-formal tour of the nostalgia train, as well as the new one. I think just yesterday, the day before. And I am currently working on writing up our comments on it. And I too, I remember actually riding those trains as a kid, and the orange carpeting was the first thing I noticed.
Although it was in better condition than I ever remember seeing it, I'll say it was pristine looking.
Well, yeah, they refurbished it. That was not the original orange carpeting. But yeah, I would encourage everybody to go down if you have time and you have the energy to go down to the mall and go see them. I believe they said it was going to be open for another 4 or 5 days as of a day or two ago. So probably through the weekend, I'm guessing. It's down there as part of the state fair thing that's going on. But it was a nice tour, and I would love any feedback on some of the accessibility changes that have been made, like the floor markings for the wheelchair spots, which I thought were fabulous. Having a separate place for bikes and strollers so that they're not taking up the wheelchair spaces.
That was nice.
Anything else that jumps out at people? There was a number of things that we're going to be making recommendations on, things that are good, but then also things that could be tweaked even more.
Fabulous.
anyway, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the talk. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of it, but I am very interested in the AV perspective, especially from the Virginia point of view. So I'll be tracking
Yeah.
what you guys are doing.
Definitely. And if you have time to tune in to all or part of the hearing Monday, there's a link for public viewing virtually. So definitely tune in, or we'll talk later.
Okay,
But I
excellent.
think we're actually 1 minute over. My apologies, everyone. I think we'll wind this down so that Karthik can get some sleep and everyone else can get some rest. And thank you all for your great comments and helping to make transportation more accessible in DC.
Thanks so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Safe travels. Enjoy
Thanks, Kel.
Estonia.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.